Artist to Art with David. David. We're going to have David right on here. Welcome to Artist to Art. Welcome. David's going to come on here from Daata. Here he is. Everybody. There we go. Hey, Vivian. We have an awesome guest on here today. We have two awesome guests today. Hey!
Hello.
How are you
It
doing?
worked. Very good.
Excellent.
I still look like me, which is unfortunate. I think I'd rather look like you, but maybe it'll happen. Maybe we can morph. I can lose some years and my beard can get longer and I can be as jolly as you. There you go.
Oh, that would be an interesting
There's
situation.
Well, we're kind of doing it, aren't we, generally with social media? So it's kind of like you can be what you want to be almost. So yeah, I think it's kind of an exciting time. Although it's really shit everywhere, it's like, you feel like there are so many possibilities, you just don't know what they are. So I think we're sort of making possibilities now. You're working a lot, you're showing your work to the world a lot, which is really impressive. And I think that's what people have to sort of rethink how they I've got two sons who are in music world, theatre world, and you realize they're finding ways through in their own world, and which is really tough when you can't do live gigs and you can't do performances that they're scheduled to do, but they're finding other ways and other routes in, and I think that's the challenge to all of us, is how you bypass. And then there's protests because people are locked in and they're angry and they real bad shit means something to people, and then it's coming out. And I think that's healthy too if it's handled well. And even when it's not handled well, it's still bad shit that needs to be said. So I'm not saying it's all great and it's lovely, but it's I'm not feeling as doom and gloom as I thought I would. So I did do a mistake at the beginning of COVID, or coronavirus, whatever we want to call it. They're both bad words. I went with my son just in like a midnight fun trip into a supermarket to see how fun it would look, to see what it was like having a huge supermarket with lots of shelves empty. And it was the biggest mistake I made. I was just depressed for like weeks. It was like, why did I do that? And subsequently I got ill. So I think I just wanted to see, does this exist? Was it real? And it was just horrible, just seeing the idea that people were just grabbing for anything to put in their kitchens because they were just worried and anxious about, Anyway.
So you started to feel that way yourself?
What, did I start to feel what? Ill?
Was it like ill inside, or was it like actually ill? Like, was it like more mental or physical sort of?
I think it was mixed with real ill because it was ill, but you also, I think there's that sort of anxiety. You're reading the papers, you have the radio, news, TV on, whatever you've got, and everything's crap everywhere. So you don't have like that benefit that there's a good thing going on somewhere. So I stopped listening to the news. I think my wife tried to encourage me to stop a bit. And, I was ill for a few weeks solid in my bed. And, at night I thought I might end up either dying or going to hospital. And I did neither. But, you only think it because you're hearing this words going on in your head and in other people's heads and mouths, and every broadcast and every media was saying, all these people are dying from this thing that you've got. So just shit. And then even when I had it, I didn't feel like it was like, I didn't feel like I'm suddenly, I'm in the good club, I've got it. I just thought it's shit for everybody out there. So I didn't suddenly have this sort of ego, I've got ill, aren't I brilliant, I've got man flu, I am, in there with the illness, because obviously that sounds stupid, but there are some people who wallow in illness. My wife thinks I get, I say I'm ill too quickly, but I have man flu, what can I do? No, I just think it's been, it's a challenging time to us all. So.
For sure is. And you've been talking to a lot of artists in this time.
Yeah. Well, it felt like a model to kind of just, saw lots of people doing it. Been trying to do it very briefly, so it's like being called a Daata 10 by 10. So we have this new project called Galleries at Daata, and we're working with galleries around the world to show their artist video, and that's our current mojo. And it just felt like it's a logic to talk to some, and so 10 by 10 minutes, like 10 questions in 10 minutes. None of them have lasted only 10 minutes, but it gives a kind of framework. As you can already tell, I talk too much, so um, it's a logic to kind of ask them questions, not me to just talk, you know, myself. So and so it's a bit like some questions about their work and some fun questions of, like, you know, your favorite record, film, because sometimes that is actually nice for people to hear. What does an artist listen to, and what do they read? And those questions in magazines are often the ones I'll read most, because I'm quite lightweight and trite. So you know, I think yeah, it's a sort of, and it's also, for me, it's about promoting that they're on our website, and it gives a kind of reason to talk to them. I got a thank you from a gallery of one artist I spoke to last week, who had just heard it and said she was really chuffed to be mentioned. And it just, if it does that, if it makes somebody feel good, it's why I'm doing it. So and you hope that somebody benefits from some word of wisdom, maybe. I'm always looking for one word I might utter in my life, but you never know. It could come out of this call.
You never know. I mean, I just want to say, for everybody else out there watching, I'm a big fan of watching them. So it's a little bit different than I do on this one, but it's really intriguing, and you have amazing guests, and you have like the thing that you do, and I really like that. Like, you've got your formula and your the thing, and you manage to like bring out awesome things from awesome artists, and I really appreciate that about
Yeah,
what you're doing.
I kept it simple. You know, you start off, and maybe next time I do it, might be do it slightly differently. I hadn't really done it before. I mean, I've done things where I've done talks internationally at big art fairs, at big projects. I don't love always those forums and panels. I think one-on-one is easier. But sometimes they're just about people's egos, and I've really been excited about, you know, hearing what an artist truly thinks about a film they like, or a book they've read, or a piece of music that inspires them. And even if it's just those few things, it's sort of that they've elaborated, some of the artists have elaborated. And it was kind of interesting. I gave a lead to one artist about my favorite video would be by that, if I was to pick one, would be by Shirin Neshat, called Turbulent, which I saw 20 years ago, and it's still stuck in my head. And this artist said it's the same film for her. So it kind of, it was like, you know, wow, we're picking on the same artwork, you know, which is kind of unusual in itself. Um, you know, sometimes there aren't that, you know, there's millions of great artworks, but sometimes there are certain artworks that stand out. And that's been in my career. I've worked with probably now thousands of artists, major artist videos, and sometimes, you know, you could be working with a great artist, and then suddenly just one of their works stands out, or artist you didn't know before, and it just has resonance. I'm just now launched over 6 galleries from India on Daata, galleries at Daata, and some of the works are so beautiful and sublime, and do things that a lot of Western works just aren't doing in the same way. And they're just filling me with a kind of, you know, sublime aesthetic, where there's kind of like beauty, vision, poetics, quality of narrative or no narrative, um, and sound. And I mean, I've not been to India, but my wife has, and my sister was born there, my brother-in-law's Indian, and they all say that's the sort of tapestry of Indian life. And it's kind of, you really feel there's something special, and these works really capture it. And I couldn't have picked works, because I don't know who all the great artists are in India, but I'm now feeling really chuffed to have these works on the website. So if people are watching, I recommend go to Daata and, you know, sign up to look at those alone, because they're just really mesmeric. I mean, and there's other works that are difficult, but it's kind of, how do you convey difficult ideas? Often is by, you know, sometimes by interesting poetry and by other messages that come through an artwork. Yeah, I was really chuffed. So that's just something we actually launched this week, a newsletter, and social media thing on the galleries on Daata that are from India. So, and actually it was Black Lives Matter that kind of drew me to kind of think about areas around the world that I don't often think about. So start listening to other voices, start listening. I know galleries, I just don't, I'm not in dialogue, I'm not with them, I'm not, and it's sort of, I've been doing that for all my career of trying to do things with different people of different backgrounds, of different artistic pursuits, and it's really like trying to listen and do things, but you know, when you don't know, it's really hard, and trying to find a way through that and to try and open your eyes and ears to understand things you don't naturally have encounters with. So I haven't had like that many encounters with on a daily basis with galleries in India, even though I see them at art fairs, and they kind of, they, you know, you get to talk to them a little bit, but you're not aware of the artist, you're not talking on a daily basis. So that's been really a great eye-opener, and I'm looking to do that in other countries around the world. And you know, just it's a challenge because there are different cultures that somehow need translation between what you're doing and what, you know, your motive is. But sometimes you can work with people who are intermediaries to introduce you. I'm doing a project in China on the same thing, and you know, there's different ways they work with social media, so you have to be sensitive to that and not be like slapping everyone in the face to try and say I do it my way and that's the end. And sometimes people need handheld and take dialogue, and that's fine too. And then sometimes it just doesn't work, or they don't like each other, or there's no chemistry. I try and work where there's a chemistry. And sometimes, you know, you approach me, we've talked, I've seen what you do. I think you've got an interesting mojo and charisma. And I think that's sometimes just the start point of inviting someone to do something, being interested in somebody else. That's how we sort of got together. Then I'm now looking at your work more. It doesn't, I don't know, I think you're doing a lot, so it's hard to kind of, you know, things will emerge for you. I think, you know, it's hard to see like one thing that stands out. I think, I'm not saying I'm your advisor or mentor, but sometimes an artist just shows one work, so that's all you've got to go on. You're doing volume and lots of drawings. I think everyone on this probably has seen them and will do, but sometimes that's, you know, you're engaging with people, which is really fantastic. And I think in this lockdown time and times of difficult how to do things and how to be, I think it's really impressive that people are doing what you're doing and opening, you know, there's an ambition with what you're doing and you're trying something. And we all have some kind of ego, and actually for someone who works with artists or galleries or curators, I'm generally not allured by the ego, but the ego is sometimes part of the process. And if, you know, people are willing to kind of talk to each other and share what they do and have a dialogue and take risk and be brave, that makes it a lot easier. Sometimes it's not all artists are the same, so not all artists have the confidence you do, so you have to sometimes see through and look for the artwork, and how do you bring people out of themselves who aren't naturally ebullient or outward going. But that's not easy, you know, because we are in a sort of slightly market-led marketing-led world with social media, but I think we're also in an inundated world with social media where not all things are good on it, and not all messages, even if they have good intent, are said in the nicest way. And you know, not everyone has to be nice. There's another kind of angle to it, and I've discovered that, you know, over years, you know, not you know, some people can be, you know, you can, you know, we know world leaders aren't all nice, as we know, but you know, expecting everyone to be nice is sort of my fantasy. And you realize that, you know, that doesn't mean that you're doing the best work and you're having to be nice. One just hopes, especially in the art world. I think in the art world, I think it's a necessity, and I think those who aren't shouldn't probably be in it, because it's so hard to exist in it. And you know, there's often people thinking there's some kind of hedge fund model around the art world, that there's some kind of big business model that we're all benefiting from. But most, and that's 95.9, no, probably 99.9% of people in the art world don't benefit easily from the art world. They're in it because they care, they have a passion, they have a focus, and that's where I'm in. I'm in it because I care. I was an artist. My wife's an artist. My kids sort of in the arts, and that's all we've got is to focus on the passion and the support of artists or the project one does. And I think if anyone's looking for it to be a sort of cash cow and a quick one, it just isn't there. It probably is. You know, it's there for a lot of people who eventually it takes time, and some people who are lucky quicker. But it just isn't. It's not a way forward. It's not a business model. So, and I think if people operate thinking it is that business model, I think it's very hard to find that, and I think you get that with social media, and you get that with, you know, the thing that people think everything's going to happen quickly, and people take time to trust things, and you know, understand work and feel comfortable and sense that someone's serious, and sometimes that can take a short while, like a few months, or sometimes it takes many years. I mean, my wife's been making work for 35 years, and she's having her career going like, you know, like that now. You know, it's not like rocket off and we're retiring, because there's still no revenue of, you know, of deep circumstance, but it's kind of, you know, she has now set many galleries around the world, and they're interested in her work because she's stuck at her guns, and then people trust that she's a great artist because she has been constantly doing it. And you find ways, when you're passionate about anything, you find ways through. And I think that's like what I said at the beginning. You know, we're all finding ways to kind of go beyond the brick wall of coronavirus and COVID and presidents. You know, we have to get beyond that and see beyond that as a kind of blockage, and that, you know, people are make things difficult. You have to circumnavigate them, financial problems and worries. We have to find ways, and people, you know, it's not really not easy, but I think we do find ways. I think I've discovered over a lifetime that, and I think often with encouragement from my wife, is that, you know, when I'm even in deep worry about no money, what project, that, you know, she usually says, well, it usually works out somehow. You know, we have tomorrow, and, you know, you're still breathing. And even if it's stressful and you're anxious and you don't know what's happening on the day, it works its way through. And I think we are generally, as humans, wily enough to get there. It's just not, for some people it's easier than others, so that's what I think we have to try and help each other, and sometimes find that some people can't do that, and is there ways of helping them. You know, like some people were helping elder people find food and buy and shop for them. When I was sick, my wife's sisters and my sisters dropped by with food parcels. So, you know, it doesn't seem like much, but it makes you feel great when you suddenly realize you're not worrying about your next meal.
That's a beautiful thing, to not have to worry about the next meal, and especially as it relates to artists. And I'm really curious about, because you have such a curiosity with other artists and finding these little tidbits and finding ways to bring out things. I'm just curious, like, what is that? Like, what's behind the curiosity? I think a lot of people now with social media, they're like, oh, all of a sudden checking out and seeing what you're doing, and kind of curious a little bit more, like what it is, how to get involved, what should they know, what should they be checking out more of about you?
I don't think me personally. I think them. I think I I don't operate on. It's not. I'm not doing some intellectual pursuit. I'm doing. I like in others, and that doesn't mean it's easy, and it's not condescending empowerment, because I'd say there's empowerment is a sort of a state of mind of, you're interested to bring out the best of other people if you have the capacity to do so. And I've tried to do that with platforms I've worked on and built, which is about finding a way to sort of serve the thing that you're doing. So my interest is serving. I work to support ultimately artists, but I don't always have the means to do so. You try and find the means, or end up working with people whose work you realize you can work with. It's usually more about the relationship with an artist, and people seeing it as a two-way street. A lot of people just think, wow, you'll show my work because I'm such a good artist and I've got you show art. Well, I actually show a specific type of art making, and so not all artwork I can show. So that would be already a bit of research that's works well if somebody works out that actually ultimately I show video work and sound works. But that doesn't mean I don't. I like other works. So my favorite artists are often painters, or and the historic ones at that. So I think what motivates me is usually by sensing someone's truth, and somebody really cares about what they do, and when they're reaching out, that they actually care what other people do and how they treat other people too, is often what I noticed. And whether somebody is passionate about a cause but are vile to other humans, it doesn't work for me. And that's not it's not a political standpoint. I just don't trust them, because if you're going to be an exponent of being good to humans, be good to humans. I mean, and that's what I try and do with my work. And if you've got a problem with how some people, I mean, some people are tricky and they do horrible things in the world, so maybe they're not so easy to treat them nice. But look, everyone, try. Not most of us aren't doing bad things. Most of us are trying to get by and serve, slightly more trite things like making art, which I think is really vital and important. And things like art, poetics, music, literature, they're the things that drive us. And, we all now know it very well with lockdown, of watching things on Netflix and listening to music. Well, those are art, those are arts. And I think, the idea that they need our support, but they also need those that are gonna the artist who makes it also has to understand the platforms and those that help them, and it's not all just a one-way street. So get a sense of what the relationship is of, if you're interested in a gallery, understand what they show and understand how they can work with you. If you walk in and you don't like what they show, and you don't like the people at the desk, and you don't like their vibe, it's likely you're not going to enjoy working with them. And some people forget that, because their ego is so that they think, oh, they'll just show my work and they'll make lots of money for me. The art world is too intimate and too, it's like there's emotion led. Somebody once said to me about my work recently, it's just business. And I said, not for me, it is. It isn't just business. It's passion, it's emotion. I spend every day, every hour thinking about what I do and care. It doesn't always manifest in things happen, but my aim is to make outcomes. I've somehow found myself working with artist video and moving image. So I'm still one of the fairly few, because a lot of people bail out because they're not making, big money from it quickly. And I've always been dedicated to keeping a narrow furrow. I probably, from becoming an artist, when I was one, you're making a narrow furrow on making a painting. And I think being that vision and truth of what you do comes across. And I think even you doing what you're doing, you can see there's a mojo, there's a regularity, and just getting people being understanding it, and it, sort of having a sense. It's sort of, I think, yeah. Sorry, I think I've answered your question.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting, like what you're saying about getting to know the artist's work, and I think that's the beautiful thing that you're really working on, and I think that's something that you're advocating for strongly, is trying to help others to get to know other artists' work, and to share that excitement, that joy, that passion, the underlying understanding behind what's behind the artist, what's behind the work itself, what are the ideas that come through. How did you come to that realization, or what would you really like in the future for that? What would you like to see in the outside world?
Big questions. I've always been involved with the arts since, childhood, in terms of what I wanted to do, be an artist. And since when I stopped, it was not stopping because I didn't want to be involved with making art. It was stopping because it was like, how do you have, sustenance? And, being alone in your studio is very tough. Knowing what's going to happen with your artwork is incredibly tough. Is there going to be sales outcomes? Will anyone look at my work? In probably reverse order, because you probably need people to look at your work first. But being an artist is incredibly tough, but it's incredibly rewarding if you dedicate yourself to it. Probably like maybe being a monk is for monks and nuns. I don't know, but it's like a dedication to something very it's hard to define, and you don't know what the outcomes are, and you feel, probably most people think they have some kind of calling to make this thing that they want to make, but people they hope will want to see. I just don't think you can judge audience. So I think you have to have skill. I probably didn't think about that when I was at art school, but now when I lecture and go into art schools, I'm always telling students to sort of learn as much as you can, especially now they pay, American style, you pay always for education, but in England, it was used to be, you used to get paid to be a student. So in the main, if you weren't of wealthy income parents, and now everyone's paying, so it's kind of like it's a really tough thing to be paying for a possibly limited outcome. So I think you have to have a real understanding of what, and that's where technique comes into education now. Learn what you can from your education. It's really important, and because then that can be useful for your making of things for the future. And even if you do other things with your careers, you've had some skill and something you've dedicated your brain to, which I think is good for any discipline. It's really should be really disciplined. I think I came to showing video through chance. I was talking to a friend who owned a cinema in Leicester Square in central London, and I was at a turning point in my working life. Of something had ended, not willingly, and something was about, I didn't know what was next, and it was literally that bit where I'm hitting a brick wall. And that evening I saw a friend for a drink, and he said, well, we're looking for new ways of getting audience in the cinema. And I said, well, I've got ideas around showing artist film. And he said, okay, why don't you do that in the cinema? So over the next 15 years, I did projects in cinemas and projects worldwide. So it sort of spawned itself. There wasn't like a big business model at the beginning, but it built its own one. And it's still for me a bit like being an artist with what I do, because you're constantly inventing ideas of how do you make sort of hitherto kind of quite difficult processes work. And that sometimes helps where there's other people who support it and help. I have a seed funding for what I do with Daata, and that helps because it means we can afford to pay artists who we commission, but it's limited and finite, and we've long planned ahead. And currently with the galleries at Daata, they've already got the work, so there's different models we built. It's just trying to find ways that kind of make sense of what you're there to do, not to try and reinvent a wheel. I'm there to try and show artists works that are already made, and trying to work with artists who make the work. I'm not trying to tell artists what to make and how to make it.
There you go. Wow. I think I have a couple questions here in a second. I think we're just about at that time. I'm going to bring up my little questions here because you've inspired me. So here we go. So quick questions. Where are you happiest, and where would you like to explore?
Where was I happiest? Wow, there's sort of questions I've asked other people. My wife asked me many years ago, where would I best like to live? And my answer, and it still will be the same answer, is with her. So that's where am I happiest. I'm probably on a daily basis happiest. I mean, maybe it's enforced happiness, but I'm happiest walking my dog at 5, 6 in the morning. Most of my family think I'm weird, but it's like the sun comes up in the summer and I wake up and I go to Hampstead Heath, which is like a heaven in the middle of London, and it's really near where I live. And then I get home and make a really lovely breakfast for myself and my wife. So I think I'm happiest there, but maybe one's happiness changes depending on maybe, it's not based on anything else. I haven't got any other vision of what I want for myself. I mean, I've often thought I'd like to have goats in the backyard, but maybe a bit of a big backyard. I can't do it where I live because my neighbours might say something. But they might make noise when I don't need them to. So my ambition has always been, could I be a goat herd? And I actually had a cousin who was one in the 60s, who's still a wonderful cousin. And he actually looked like you in the 60s, and he had a beard like yours and a style like yours. And so you've inspired me. And he was a goat herd, but he told me it's rather hard work. So but so maybe not. I've always liked being in Scotland. The Western Isles of Scotland is a very heavenly place. It's like very green, lush. If you can get over there's lots of midges and things that bite you. I've not been bitten. I get bitten in my garden. If you look there, so
Oh
I get
yeah,
bitten in London, so I can cope with being bitten in Scotland. I think Scotland is somewhere I think of as heaven, certain parts of it. But
interesting.
I want to be with my wife and family first. So I think that's my mojo. And just so there's a question to answer, quite a few people who are commenting have said there's a lot of books behind me. They are real books, except I can't say I've read them all, but my wife probably has. I've selected a lot of them. A lot of them there are where my finger points are poems. I'm a big fan of poetry. So I had a period where I looked at them more. They're not, I'm in my studies, so it's not like a show off. They're books that never get touched. They're sort of inspiration. And they're things that you sort of get and then you put there somewhere. But I sometimes just the ring binder of a book inspires me, the name of the book. And I know, but it's like the other, my son's working on a script for a project he's doing. He's a musical theatre dancer, actor, singer, but he's writing some projects, and I could pull some books out for him, and it's kind of, that's what's really wonderful. You can browse and see titles and go, that would be really inspiring. And then if I go there, there's a whole lot of CDs, which I don't play too much because everything's on internet, so you don't really need to. And I used to have vinyl, and I stupidly went, I'm getting rid of vinyl because no one's ever going to look at vinyl again. And I had a huge vinyl collection. I used to collect classical music and reggae music, and both of my passions of music. And I collected both, had a huge collection, and I gave it away to a friend, only to discover now I've got a son who's a jazz bassist who collects vinyl. So I wish I had it still. So I would have been a little bit cooler and a little bit more of a greater dad had I handed over my vinyl collection. And it was good, but maybe it's my fantasy that it was better than I thought it was. So but it's like those things you just don't think are going to get into play again. I
Right.
kind of bought CDs thinking that's the future, and now I don't play those because we're on the internet. And I sort of did, because I tidied up this room so I could work in here during the beginning of lockdown. And suddenly I realized, oh, I've got all these amazing CDs, but you still find it hard to play because you've got to push them in, press a button. So archaic.
Archaic. That's an interesting thing. So I've got these few questions. So let's see. Inspirational artist, thought provoker, mentor, or someone who inspires you.
Yeah. I
I
suppose
mean, I know you know where these
I
questions
know where
came
these
from,
questions come from. It's all right.
but I had to allow you time. I think it's sometimes so important for the person who's asking to also be asked.
Yeah, I think a spatial artist, I'm kind of a real big fan of inspirational artists. Is tough, but I'd probably go to someone like Philip Guston, which is dead artist, but not that, fairly recent, and someone identifying, his modern, his minimalist, but also his figuration, his paint handling, the color, his I mean, he's sort of like quite a lot of people's kind of favorite artist. I feel like he kind of moves into Philip Glass. I guess
Let's maybe show them some pictures of
Philip Guston, yeah.
yeah, can
There's
we
a
see that?
foundation now, Philip Guston Foundation. He shows with Hauser and Vert. So there's shows of his recently in LA. I saw
Mhm.
this year, maybe last year, and I can't remember which planet I'm on, but I saw them not that long ago. Um, and he's just, in my view, of modernism a top bar. But I'm a big fan of Goya, Vermeer. My favorite artist is Jane Bustin, who's my wife. So like beyond like any other level of favorite. So that's. But I think music inspires me a lot. There's, I guess, even though I love reggae and its thumping beat that's a little bit like a heartbeat, and I grew up with it, listening to it as a teenager, and I never stopped. Maybe I never grew up. Classical music, I'm really a big fan of Arvo Pärt, and his music kind of keeps resonating with me as brilliant music, even though it's now well known and popular. When I was an art student, somebody else was playing a record in their studio, and I knew I'd heard like magic in somewhere, and I went in there and said, what is this, I need this. And it was Arvo Pärt's album Tabula Rasa, which is still available on ECM. Big plug to them. And sort of in that
I went
context,
saw the Arvo Part concert in DC. That was pretty good. It was
I
really good.
just
It turned me on, just kind of.
Yeah, I think it's just, when you sort of, if you're going for what's your most inspiring, and I know one or two people who know him quite well and who've played music with him, an organist called Christopher Bowers Broadbent, who I know as a friend, and I've known him since I was a child. He's played a lot of the organ music on his albums. Our Boss is a great album with that organ music. So I feel connected, even though I'm not really, it's just by name. And um, Tarkovsky, I saw a beautiful show of Tarkovsky's films in, I was recently in Amsterdam, and there was a beautiful show at the Eye Museum, and I realized how brilliant he is. And like, it was just like everything's magic, and clips are just beautiful, music, choices of music. And he's a filmmaker, but he's an artist, and he's a poet, and that kind of thing just comes, it's so obvious. And I guess my pointer to artists is think often of the artist that inspires you the most, and try and make work that is as close to what inspires you. And I think, obviously I don't make work, but in recently looking at some of that artworks from Indian galleries, I've realized how brilliant they are, and they match my thinking about artists like Tarkovsky or the Shirin Neshat I mentioned. And I think she's a brilliant artist, and the project Turbulent is amazing. I saw it with my son, who was 1 year old at the time, at a big exhibition at the Serpentine in London, and he was on my lap, and I knew how amazing it was because he didn't move an inch. And this piece of work, Turbulent, is this sort of powerful sort of Iranian voice of a male singing, and there's the sort of split screen between female and male. So it's and it's beautifully shot, brilliant, but it's also powerful description of how different sort of the sexual how they handle that world. And it just sort of, but you just engaged. And if I was to put the music of that track, that would be in my top list of music that inspires me. Just hearing it just makes me have a shiver down my spine. And that's often my mojo, is what will send a shiver down my spine. My dog, cuddling me might too. So
That's
so
an
that's sort
interesting.
of, I think that's sort of the answer to your. I think I answered your question that was sort of originally my question to other people.
Yeah. I'm just giving you an opportunity to answer your own questions, really.
Yeah, but I sort
That's
of didn't
part
want
of
to
it.
ask an artist when I put that question down. I didn't want to ask an artist what was it, just an artist, because it might be a thought provoker,
Thought
like
provoker,
like
mentor, someone who inspires you.
yeah, like I've there's the you know I don't know, my father once marched with Martin Luther King, and I've always been inspired by Martin Luther King, not because I come from his world, but because I'm part of his world. And he spoke in a way, even though a lot of it was around religion and God, which didn't really mean that much to me, but he spoke about humanity and about us being good to each other. And that voice, there's certain people whose voices rise above other people's voices, and we still need his voice now, and it still is there. And I so sometimes people ask who would be your dinner guest, your special dinner guest, who live or dead. He's for some, and I think he's the same for a lot of other people. Um, yeah. But you don't know. Maybe he'd probably just think I'm a dickhead. So I don't know if that's kind of be like, that's my fear. I had a father who was very bright and very worldly, and I often used to think, okay, he's just going to think I'm a young kid just worrying about making paintings, going on dates, what food I'm going to eat, um, you know, which gig I'm going to go to. So, and he was having to worry about his life being possibly taken from him in Auschwitz, and his family all being killed or having to survive. And, so what time zone you're in, when you are in it, leads to how you are. And I guess I had to acknowledge that my life was mine, and it was fine to those worries were the worries I have. Like now we have the worries around our existence now, and I know a lot of young people and kids are very anxious about their futures. You can't really just relate it to what we had in the past and how good or bad it was. It has to be about how we make things possible for them now. So when I talk about empowerment, I think it's our duty of all of us to look at empowering others. It doesn't mean it's easy, but maybe if you think about it, it becomes possible. And and that's with a lot of the kind of debates right now, and I wouldn't say some of them aren't really debates, they're just realities, that we have to find ways that we do make everyone feel they're equal and part of the same planet, and work extra hard where we haven't in the past. And it's not easy for us all to get it right. I think you've just got to try. I think those who try, at least they're up there in the good list.
So the trying to empower, the working on empowering others, that seems to be a very central point to you and your work, really.
It feels right. I mean, there was a period where I was like empowering art collectors to support artists, and it sounded really trivial. Why are you empowering people who have a lot of money? Well, empowerment is like, how do you open doors that they could support artists or venues that needed it? And then you realize even if people have a lot of means, they don't always know what to do. It's like everyone assumes somebody else is in a better position, and financially they may be, but in a sense of mojo or a path forward or how they think, maybe not so. And that's not to assume one way or the other, but people often like to be led and given guidance. People go to the cinema because the cinema put something on. People, somebody's done something to get you in that room, a gig, whatever, a meal, there's a chef that's cooked it. So sometimes people like to be led into a position of what they can do with their time and how they could maybe serve others or enjoy themselves or change the world. And I'm in the art world, so changing the world is a bit more difficult through art, but it's actually it can help change hearts and minds, and it can make people feel good about themselves. And I think that's a really vital part of any equation of how we exist. And it's not all about who you voted for all the time, except if I had my way, it would be people who think about other people in a good way. And there could be some conjecture of that, so I don't try and thrust that forward on my social media or how I speak, but generally my mojo is about how do we empower each other, so the politics around that is quite evident. And if it's and also it's, I think what I said, if we try hard for each other, it's not easy because we'd sometimes just hunkered down and how do we just serve our own ends and how do we exist from day to day. But that's all very well, but if we're not looking at your next door neighbor and are they fine, and if you're not in the street and someone falls over and you don't want to pick them up, then you have to look inside yourself of who are you. And I'm not a priest, and I'm not trying to, but I would run to the explosion to help somebody out of the burning house. That's my nature. That doesn't mean I'm better than someone who doesn't. I would hope that we can all think that's probably how to support others is a good way. And I like to think I'm a good guy, so I try it.
Well, I really like that about empowering others. I mean, that's why I do these parts, is like, how can I not only do my own work, but how can I empower others? And I'm very curious about other people who are also empowering others and what that you know, and empowering artists, you know, and especially like arts that I like jive with and vibe with. And so I'm very curious about these Indian galleries. I lived in India for a while, so and I found very few art museums, but everywhere on the street I felt was like a painting, movie, something, a piece of art playing out every day. I felt living alive inside of it. But I only found like one really amazing gallery, which was the Modern Art Museum in Delhi. I looked all over, but I'm curious, um, you know, how you found these galleries and how you started to work with them and what your dream of them would be.
Well, it's simple, really. I work currently with a lot of galleries, and I've met quite a lot of the people who run them at art fairs around the world. I worked with Art Basel for many years as their curator of film in Miami, and other art fairs like Armory, blah de blah. All so you're connecting, and I go around art fairs as a sort of interested in art person. So go to Frieze, and you'll see certain galleries. There's ones like Project 88, and there's Experimenta. So they're names that come in. But I sort of I have a friend called Sana Rosewit, who's a consultant and an art advisor and does projects, and she's based in New York, but she's Indian, and she has a big interest in Indian artists and Indian galleries and bringing collectors and consulting to the two, bring them together. So we're friends, and we talk a lot about projects, and I just asked her one day, could you introduce me? This quite recently, and then she made a brokering email. And so it's got a warm person, but then now we're talking about other ways we can work and engage and talk about the galleries. It's just a model, but it's sort of, you suddenly discover you actually like what they do. I've liked speaking with them. It's a bit like probably being I've never been, but my father was there for 3 years. My older sister was born there, who lives in New York. And so being India has always been resonant. My brother-in-law is Hindu, and his family are from Delhi, and my wife went to the wedding and then went round, and I've always been jealous that I didn't go. So I think we're starting to make plans about a mission to go there. I think we're going to aim for next year. I think it's just one of those places. I don't know it's going to be my happiest place, but I know it's going to be a lively place. So you asked me that question before. I've always wanted to go, so I want a reason to. Now we're making a reason. I don't know what the reason is. I'm talking to galleries there, getting more interested in their artworks. I'm connecting. I think it's just connecting with things, and it's sometimes you find your moment with a thing. And India has always been like a sort of mythological place in my head, just because of the people I'm connected to who come from there. Even my sister, who is actually not have any Indian heritage, I've always see as Indian because she was born there. And anyway, she's always proud that she was born in Mumbai. And and my dad was actually a rabbi in India, so it kind of just slightly interesting, kind of the connection. And it was his first community as a rabbi, and it was just they hadn't had one for hundreds of years before him. Someone leading their community as a rabbi, and then that building that was a synagogue was then burnt in more recent times in riots between Hindus and Muslims. So it's a difficult place. I'm sure it's a complex nature, but there's something about it that, and I know anybody I know's been and come back with beautiful photographs, stories of, my wife said it won't be that relaxing, but I love Indian food. So yeah, you've got me, India. Yeah, I'm all yours right now. So
I dream of going back sooner than later. It's in my heart. It's in my heart, it's in my mind.
I think it's in there for me too. Yeah, so that could be a future happy place. I just don't know it enough. So it's my fantasy happy place. My wife thinks I'm a bit stressed sometimes, so maybe relaxing vibe might not be its thing for me. But
it depends where you are in India, and it really depends where you are. If you're in the big cities, probably not, almost definitely not. Especially if you're trying to get anywhere and you have a watch on and you like have to be somewhere and you think that it's like the time on your watch instead of like the time it would be for like an artist to create a work of art, and just be like, oh, like it's 5 more minutes, and then it's 5 more minutes, and then it's 5 more minutes, and it's like, and then someone eventually says it's actually like a half an hour drive. So
Yeah, it's like, I think I actually sometimes like being in situations that you don't expect, and I'm sort of quite conservative about that idea, but once you're in it, I'm fine. I yeah, I think as you get older, you're a little more confident. You've been around, body languages of other people. I'm not so worried about other humans. I'm probably more worried about things happening as I want them to. I like timekeeping. I like punctuality. So I know there could be issues around that, but I also like there's a magic in the air that I sense that I'm going to fall for. So I already have. So, and it's also when you're talking to people and you like talking with them, and when you're talking to any of the galleries I've recently been talking to, I just always enjoy the dialogue, and it just feels totally genuine. And anyway.
yeah, that's exciting. I'm excited for you when all this thing is passes through.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Then
not right now hoping to travel anywhere. I think the idea of being on a plane is, I do a lot of it. So this period's been quite a wonderful time to not be in airplanes and queues in airports. They don't fill me with glee. But I like it when I get to the other end. It's like, for me, I'm project led. So I don't naturally think of holiday. I think of the project I'm on, and how you can, when you get out the airplane, you're going off to the place to do it, excites me. And just I've sort of been doing it in this room for the last many months. So therefore, I go off for those long walks with my dog in the morning, just so I've sort of been out. I breathed in good air. And actually, it was amazing with lockdown. Suddenly, just I got a real sense of ecology, and just not seeing planes or hearing planes in the air, hearing birds, not having any sounds. You realize what sound pollution you live with in a city, and then you realize what other pollutions that causes. And I don't naturally think that way. As I said, I try and be a good person, but I'm not, fighting every battle on every foot, but I've always been conscious. And then suddenly I realized how conscious I was of how much I loved being in silence, and not having airplanes flying over my head all the time, and not hearing cars and motorbikes and even people around you all the time. So there's been benefits. I just probably wish they were for some other reason, like we were all caring a little bit more because it made sense not to be in those things. I guess now, it's interesting dialogues one's having with a lot of people, even inside my own family, as we've realized we don't need as much, and we're not, and the idea of not being able to go to shops doesn't fill us with disappointment. It's kind of realized we're not in need of more than just maybe eating nice food and sitting around and being able to be together and have a roof over our head. Obviously there's things of culture we miss, being together. I kind of even like football, and I don't love crowds, but I don't see a logic of going, not seeing a crowd somewhere, in football. That's part of its excitement, almost part of it's quite a simple, sort of simplistic thing, so actually the crowd being together is part of what brings its logic together. I don't really want to go to a museum and see lots of people in it, because I like emptiness, but one of the reasons it exists is because crowds turn up and makes it work, function. It has an economy because of that. And I think we're just going to have to find different ways, or we're going to get through it, and we will just think this was a kind of a really hefty blip on our landscape, like people have got through other things. But this is it's interesting how it makes you think differently.
now, would you like to show us around at all? Because I know we see the same view of you every time you get on the 10x10.
You mean
Would you
show
like
me
to take
around like with the
and show
room
us
I'm
around a
in?
little bit? Yeah,
What do you mean?
if
Just
you'd like to. I don't know. It's just
there's
like,
the room. There's the CDs,
mm-hmm.
and there's the dog. Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm. And
uh-huh.
so that's about it. There's not much to see because I'm not going to go around showing my family in a state of undress as we're about to go out to celebrate the night before my son's birthday. But he's 22 and it's a celebration. So we've got we're making fun for a family. So that's exciting in our family. My dog is always with me, so we're like, joined at the hip. And even if I didn't want him to be, he would be there because, we're like, Siamese twin lovers now. So,
What's the name of your dog?
he's called Max. He's a Whippet. They're very thin racing dogs.
Do you think you could get him on here?
I don't.
I just like. I think it's nice, to get to know you a little bit more after you've been getting to know so many others.
Max,
And
what do you think? He's asleep, really. He's in a coma. He's in don't bother trying to take me out into any warm weather because I don't like it. And you might be an idiot human that goes out in the heat. I'm not. So that's me speaking for him, but I'm probably close to accurate. He's probably thinking other thoughts like, why is Dad talking every time he's in his room to strange people on Instagram? That's what dogs think. Don't we all know that? So, he thinks that. I'm looking forward to the day he does speak, but it's probably going to say things to me I won't want to hear. Because you sort of go for dog walks and you're thinking, all right, I know we get on, but you could at least say something. You could say, what do you think about, Donald Trump or something, because, we like to have a laugh and a joke about things, but that one is he just thinks that's so ridiculous. He can't actually fathom that question. So I think he's quiet maybe because he doesn't know how to phrase the question, or he's just a dog. I have quite a fondness for animals, as you might have guessed, but it's I didn't know that really till I had one. I was a bit worried getting a dog because I'm always worried because I love a lot. So the idea of getting an animal, my family wanted me to get one because I work at home. They wanted me to go out, and I've got diabetes, and they thought good exercise. So I thought, I was a bit unsure because I thought this is going to be I'm going to connect so much with the dog and then worry about somebody else. I worry about my two sons and my wife all the time. Now I've got a dog to worry about. It's great. So at least you've got another thing to worry about, but at least he doesn't stop me taking pictures of him, which is really good. They all do. They all do speak. So there are benefits to people not speaking, and that my dog doesn't speak. So he doesn't tell me not to take photographs of him, and therefore he's a feature on my Instagram only because he models for me at any moment. He generally finds himself sitting in the light, and it's he knows when it's a good picture. So he probably doesn't know what a picture is, but maybe he does. And one day he'll tell me he actually he used to work with Wim Wenders or Tarkovsky, and he knows how to take good photographs, and he sits very good in light. A lot of people say I should do more with him as a model, as make a book and do artworks with him, but I don't want to have that pressure. I'm sort of quite happy. I do it because I love him, not because I want some other outcome from it.
Wow.
Anyway,
sounds like a beautiful relationship you have.
It is, and it's very innocent. So just so you know, so you don't start having any weird, strange thoughts. When I said it's kind of, it's that thing where someone sort of seems to love you without question, and maybe they just want to get out the house, maybe they just want some food, but I'm going with it. So so that's been locked down. There's a lot of walks since I was ill, so we celebrate the outdoors, and then I sort of feel like it's also cool in the morning. It's not hot, and you get the sunrise, you get the beauty, you get the birds, and then later in the day those same places can get quite crowded and not my kind of thing. So but I haven't got much more to I haven't got much more to show you. I could I have lots of notes around me of things I do, but they just will bore you. I have alcohols near me, but I don't drink very much. I have lots of other things. No, I've actually tidied away Yeah. So the books are about as well, that's me. Like my interesting self is hidden in those books.
Yeah, I just like the idea of letting people get to know you a little bit more since you're always getting to know others. I mean, as long as I've been watching you, so I know you do a lot of other things and you work with the galleries and all of that.
Yeah, no,
But I think
I,
there's a lot of new people coming
I'm,
in.
I'm, 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 yeah, I'm pretty much what I say. So I haven't got like some other world that I'm operating in. I'm not sort of like, there's not something missing. I mean, there might be lots of things I don't say right now, but I'm pretty open. And I guess you asked that question, what artists should